Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Simon Marks and here are the headlines on a very dramatic Thursday. Boris Johnson announces his intention to step down as leader of Britain's Conservative Party and thus as the country's Prime Minister. He blames a herd instinct at Westminster for undermining him and sparks fresh controversy by insisting he will stay on as a caretaker Prime Minister. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky thanks the British Prime Minister for his support in the most difficult of times. Russian officials, meanwhile, celebrate Boris Johnson's downfall as a leading tycoon calls the British leader a stupid clown. And in other news today, India's Financial Crime Agency has blocked 119 bank accounts linked to Vivo's India business as part of a probe into alleged money laundering by the Chinese smartphone manufacturer.
I want you to know that from now on until the new Prime Minister is in place, your interests will be served and the government of the country will be carried on.
The party is over for Boris Johnson. The defiance not to resign was short-lived. As ministers and aides deserted him, it was one scandal too many. Johnson's term as PM is one of the shortest in British history. It started in chaos.
I want to thank
it ends in disgrace.
The British public.
From Brexit to exit.
And so we begin today in London, where UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he now recognises that his stewardship of the country's Conservative Party and thus the UK government is coming to an end. But in a statement that was entirely devoid of contrition, despite even more resignations from his government only today, he insisted he will stay on as a caretaker Prime Minister until the Conservative Party elects a new leader.
Good afternoon. Thank you. It is clearly now the will of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister. And I've agreed with Sir Graham Brady, the chairman of our backbench MPs, that the process of choosing that new leader should begin now. And the timetable will be announced next week. And I've today appointed a cabinet to serve, as I will, until a new leader is in place. I want to thank you, the British public, for the immense privilege that you have given me. And I want you to know that from now on until the new Prime Minister is in place, your interests will be served and the government of the country will be carried on.
Johnson explained his decision to put the nation through an agonising 48 hours by referencing the mandate he claims he was personally given by Britain's voters in the country's 2019 election. But of course his name was only on the ballot in his own local constituency. He only serves as Prime Minister because he is the leader of his party. His statement today came after more than 50 members of his own government and many of his top aides resigned in just the last 2 days, sparked by his handling of misconduct allegations levelled against a senior member of the government. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss beat a hasty retreat from the G20 ministerial meeting that's taking place in Indonesia, saying that Johnson had made the right decision. There's speculation that she is heading back to London to launch her own leadership bid. The 58-year-old Prime Minister has been in power for almost 3 years, despite a series of non-stop swirling scandals. He was accused of being too close to party donors, of protecting supporters from bullying and corruption allegations, of constantly placing self-interest above the national interest, and of being dishonest with the public about parties that took place in Downing Street and other government offices that broke COVID-19 lockdown regulations. The straw that broke the camel's back, Johnson's recent concession that he knew about sexual misconduct allegations against fellow Conservative lawmaker Chris Pincher and yet promoted him anyway to a senior position. We're joined now live from Westminster. Of the atmosphere there. I mean, it has clearly been a very dramatic couple of hours in British politics, and I think it's fair to say the uncertainty is not entirely over yet.
That's absolutely right, Simon. It is a very, very busy day here. We've got the usual mix of tourists, but of course we've got all the journalists from really around the world standing outside number 10 Downing Street as we've been waiting throughout the morning for the speech from the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. And as you say, he has agreed to step down as leader of the Conservative Party, but he has said that he will not stand down as Prime Minister for another few months. Now, this is certainly not the end of the roller coaster, because many people think that actually that's just not acceptable. They think he needs to go now, he needs to leave number 10 and give way to a new leadership who can begin to rebuild trust in the Conservative Party. So we're seeing a very mixed picture on the ground. We're seeing, for example, the leader of the opposition Labour Party, Keir Starmer, actually threaten to call a vote of confidence in the Prime Minister if he doesn't step down as Prime Minister sooner than he said. And other MPs, but from all parties, but even the Conservative Party, have said similar.
And Sally, let's just be clear. I mean, Boris Johnson staying on as a caretaker Prime Minister would require him to be able to appoint people to many, if not all, of those 50 positions that are currently vacant. How on earth is he going to be able to do that? How on earth, even as a caretaker, is he going to be able effectively to govern?
That's absolutely right. There's a lot of speculation that he won't be able to fill all of those positions. We've seen throughout the morning local time, there's been announcements of new ministerial positions being filled one after another, but there are so many more left to do, as well as ministerial aides. And so it's really unclear if he is going to have the support to keep on going. Now, we've also seen some members of the cabinet who hadn't resigned, the small number, have said that they will continue on in those positions to support the running of the government as the leadership election takes place. So those include, for example, Home Secretary Priti Patel. But, as you mentioned earlier, Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, could well be on her way back to start her own leadership bid. So there's no doubt that some people who are either in the government as we speak or maybe soon asked to be in the government actually would rather use that time to start working on their own campaigns for an election that's likely to take place as soon as this summer. So it really is going to be still very much up in the air as to whether he is able to continue as Prime Minister, getting things through government, getting things through Parliament, keeping the country running when he has lost so much support.
And Sally, talk a little bit about pressure that's coming from senior figures within the Conservative Party. We've seen within the last few minutes, just as we were coming on air, a letter that former Prime Minister Sir John Major has written to Sir Graham Brady, who of course heads the influential 1922 Committee of Backbenchers that will now decide when a leadership election is going to take place. He says that Boris Johnson's proposal that he should remain as a caretaker Prime Minister may be unsustainable. He says for the overall well-being of the country, Mr. Johnson should not remain in Downing Downing Street any longer than necessary to effect the smooth transition of government. I mean, that's an indication that Sir John Major and presumably many others in Westminster just have a feeling that Boris Johnson is playing for time and is still hoping, even at this last moment, that something might come along to revive his fortunes.
That's absolutely right. There are still significant numbers of leading figures, as you say, coming out saying he really needs to go now. This is not just the opposition Labour Party or the Scottish National Party saying it's time for him to go, give room to someone else. Actually, people in his own inner circle and people who really have authority within the Conservative Party are calling on him to go. Another example is Lord Heseltine, who said he really, now is the time. Another is his former right-hand man, Dominic Cummings, who says, and I quote, he's playing for time and will try to stay. And he said if he does stay, that will cause carnage. So this is very much mounting pressure from across the board. The other thing we haven't really mentioned is that the public are also very keen for him to be gone. In a poll that was put out over the last couple of days, we saw that 69% of the public more widely think that he needs to go. And within the Conservative Party, that's the majority of members as well, according to this poll. So it's, as I say, it really is pressure from across the board, from his own cabinet, well, now his former cabinet, his own MPs, former MPs and Lords, and also the public themselves. So it really is a matter of time of, if he will be able to hang on or if he will feel the need to leave before October and just give way to some fresh leadership who can start to restore trust in what people see as a really damaged Conservative Party.
Sally Patterson, live for WION at Westminster on a very dramatic and historic day in British politics. Thank you very much indeed for that update. Now, while making his resignation speech, Boris Johnson said it's up to his party to decide who will be the next Conservative chief. And there are several candidates already jockeying to succeed him. As we've said, Foreign Secretary Liz Truss is one of them. She's popular with some sections of the party. Also in the running, Jeremy Hunt, a former British Foreign Secretary, who made it clear that he would be likely to run for leader again after he finished second to Boris Johnson in the party's leadership contest back in 2019. Ben Wallace is the current Defence Secretary. He has become the most popular member of government with Conservative Party members, in part thanks to his handling of the crisis in Ukraine. Nadhim Zahawi, who's just been made Chancellor of the Exchequer, is also considered to be a potential front-runner, and there are many other names being thrown into the ring. For more, we're joined now from London by Alexander Claxon. He's a political analyst and the founder of the Global Political Insight think tank. Alexander, thanks very much indeed for being with us today. Let me just start by asking you your thoughts on just how long Boris Johnson can stay on. Is the Conservative Party not now likely to accelerate the race to succeed him?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And in answer to your question, I think so. There has just been too much controversy surrounding Boris Johnson, and his position has become essentially so toxic to the Conservative Party that the party essentially needs to think about its standing among the general public, as well as any future general election. Now, of course, it should be noted that a general election is not coming up for the foreseeable future. The current parliament has at least another 3 years of mandate, as the last election was only held in 2019, so only just over 3 years ago. But nevertheless, many of the members of the Conservative Party understand that Boris Johnson is now viewed very unfavorably among the general public in the UK, and the longer he stays on as the Prime Minister of the country, the more damage essentially he can do to the Conservative Party going forward, which in turn will, of course, damage the party's chances of winning in future general elections, as well as any by-elections that may take place in specific constituencies as well.
Absolutely. As you scan the runners and riders in the race to succeed Boris Johnson, Are we going to see an end to an era of populism in the UK? Are we going to return to some sense of a greater degree of orthodoxy in the way in which the British government is run, regardless of which candidate wins?
Well, if we use the United States as an example, then perhaps the answer is yes. Obviously, in the United States, after Donald Trump, there was a significant push for some kind of normalcy in the country, let's say a more standard leader in the face of Joe Biden. We could see a similar situation in the UK. I think Boris Johnson his mannerisms and his character were popular at some point, but it's worth noting that at the moment the UK is undergoing very severe challenges, both economic and societal. The economy is in a dire situation. The inflation is reaching around 10%. The growth in the country is going to be one of the lowest among the G7 countries. Energy prices have risen to the point where many people are struggling to pay for their energy bills. So what many people are looking for is a leader who can essentially get things done. The public are not interested in someone who can make jokes, who can make people laugh. That might have worked at a time when there was no war on the European continent. I'm of course talking about the conflict in Ukraine. That might have been fine then when things were fine. But at the moment when the country is facing significant challenges, both in the country itself and in the European continent more widely, I think many people are looking for a stable leader who can get things done.
And I'm not going to hold you to this, Alexander, but if you look at the field of possible candidates that are out there right now, today, who do you think's the winner?
It's really impossible to say at the moment. There is no clear front runner. A lot will depend. Well, what I can say, I think, at this stage is it's likely to be someone who is a Brexiteer. Regardless of what happened with Boris Johnson, we must remember that the Conservative Party broadly remains in favour of Brexit. So it is likely that the general public, the members of the Conservative Party, because they'll be the ones who will be choosing the next leader of the party, they will likely choose someone who is a Brexiteer. They will likely choose someone who wants to cut taxes, because Boris Johnson actually raised taxes recently. That was quite an unpopular move among the Conservatives. So we can expect, let's say, certain characteristics of who might be the next leader or on what platform he or she will run. But to be honest, it's absolutely impossible to say who will be the next leader of the Conservative Party.
Absolutely right. Alexander Claxon, political analyst and founder of the think tank Global Political Insight. Thanks very much indeed for joining us on this extraordinary day in London. Boris Johnson succumbed to the inevitable on this day, just 2 weeks before he would have completed 3 years in office. So let's take a look at the Prime Minister's remarkable but deeply controversial political journey.
Prime Minister, how's your week going?
Terrific, like many others.
It was a challenging week, to say the least, for the British Prime Minister. What started as claims of lying against Number 10 concluded with an end to Johnson's premiership. Boris Johnson joined the Conservative Party as a candidate in 1997. He lost his first political bid to the opposition Labour Party, but stood for the Parliament again in 2001, this time winning the bid in the Henley-on-Thames constituency. In the next 6 years, Johnson regularly appeared on the telly, made some controversial comments, had to apologise for a few as well, but led on with his political journey. Johnson was elected the Mayor of London in 2007, winning a tight race against the Labour Party led by Gordon Brown. He later served as the Foreign Secretary under Theresa May.
I have to say that the Foreign Secretary is doing an absolutely excellent job. He is, in short, an FFS, a fine Foreign Secretary.
Johnson's tenure as the Foreign Secretary also came with controversies. He found himself in a spot often, given the blunt statements made.
I use phrases and language that have caused offence. Of course, I'm sorry for the offence that I have caused, but I will continue to speak as directly as I can.
In 2019, Boris Johnson was elected leader of the Conservative Party.
Jeremy Hunt, 46,656. Boris Johnson, 92,153. And therefore I give notice that Boris Johnson is elected as the leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party.
And appointed the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom the next day.
I have just been to see Her Majesty the Queen, who has invited me to form a government, and I have accepted.
The first thing Johnson did on assuming charge was reopening of the Brexit negotiations, a poll promise that he made.
And yes, they will have an overwhelming mandate from this election to get Brexit done, and we will honour that mandate by January the 31st.
Amid several deadlocks, stalled conversations, protests and opposition, the UK left the EU on the 31st of January 2020. The Tories made promises of an independent British economy, but as fate would have it, the tall claims were dampened by the COVID-19 pandemic.
The time has now come for us all to do more. From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home.
While the government's quick rollout of COVID-19 vaccine buoyed the Johnson administration, his lockdown party sank the public's trust in number 10. Johnson has faced months of damaging revelations of parties held at his office in defiance of the COVID-19 lockdowns. The leaked images and videos started propping up in the media at the beginning of this year.
There was a brief gathering in the Cabinet Room shortly after 2 p.m, lasting for less than 10 minutes, during which people I work with kindly passed on their good wishes. And I have to say, in all frankness, at that time, it did not occur to me that this might have been a breach of the rules.
Johnson had his justifications, but they could not build back the trust of the public. Partygate was just the start of a series of scandals that would follow. 2 Tory MPs were forced to quit from their seats following sexual misconduct claims. The party failed to save the seat in a by-poll held last month. The final nail in the coffin was the Pincher scandal. The former Tory whip stepped down following claims of sexual misconduct. Chris Pincher had a history of such inappropriate behaviour, which was conveniently ignored by Johnson while electing Pincher as the party whip. The Tory government fell like a pack of cards. Those who have resigned say that the government has lost integrity, that there needs to be some accountability, and that Johnson cannot let his personal political ambitions override his duty as the Prime Minister. Now, with history as witness, Johnson has a tainted political legacy and no office to hold on to. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
There is no word from the Biden administration here in Washington yet about Boris Johnson's decision to go, but Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has paid tribute to the Prime Minister's leadership, while the Russian government is celebrating his decision to stand down. Here in the US, former President Donald Trump once described Boris Johnson as Britain Trump. And some observers here will believe that on this day in the UK, the constitutional guardrails that failed largely to protect American democracy from Donald Trump's conspiracy theory-believing supporters on January the 6th of last year when they ransacked Capitol Hill have in fact proved more resilient on the other side of the Atlantic. But much depends on who comes next, how quickly they arrive in Downing Street, and whether Boris Johnson's departure presages a new era of stability for his party and for his country. That's WION Live Broadcast from Washington, D.C. on this extraordinary day on the other side of the Atlantic. Stay with WION for full coverage of what's taking place in Britain and around the world. Continuing news updates right here on WION World is One.
There are many other. This is right, Arab.